I have been thinking all night long about what this chapter of D.Gray-Man, chapter 220, meant. I knew D.Gray-Man was a confusing series when I started. I've heard many stories, many Chibits telling me about it. But now, seeing it firsthand with, the latest chapter, it really goes to show you how D.Gray-Man requires you to really go back and read a lot just to understand the full picture, or you have to reread the current chapter to get the entire meaning of what it's about. And that's kind of what we are facing with this chapter of D.Gray-Man. See, D.Gray-Man has switched over to a quarterly release. Like, every 3 months, D.Gray-Man has a new chapter. So if you factor that in, we're only going to be getting 4 chapters a year. And if the content's going to be about 40 pages long, along with, a release every 3 months, that's actually a huge gap in between those, and you might forget about details from the latest chapter, let alone the entire series. So, there's a huge gap, but I'm not complaining because I'm glad the mangaka is still writing, because not many mangaka will take the time out of their day to actually continue writing, especially if they've been injured, they've been wounded, and they have this, injury to where they can't really write anymore. It's commendable to see how the mangaka of D.Gray-Man continues on trucking along with writing this series, even though she is injured. So, I have no issue with the delays, or like the 3 months wait for another chapter, or 40-page chapters. Now, it is something I'm a little bit sad about, but it's nothing that I want to complain about, because the mangaka has done some good work, especially the artwork. The artwork looks really nice, a huge improvement from the original series. But let's get into what this chapter is about. So, majority of readers of this chapter, even myself included when I read this chapter yesterday around 3 o'clock in the day, I sat down, I read it, and I'm like, what the fuck am I reading? That was my first general reaction. Now, I'm not joking. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, what the fuck am I reading? When I sat down and read yesterday's chapter of D.Gray-Man, and I'm thinking like, okay, so clearly I'm stupid because I don't understand what's going on. Like, I thought I was having a brain fart. But then, hearing some other Chibits message me on YouTube, they're like, Chibi, I need you to make a review of this because I don't understand the chapter at all. And I'm thinking like, okay, so it's not just me. And then I was starting to get flashbacks of how some asked me about Tokyo Ghoul, and I'm like, oh no, so this is that type of series to where I'm going to have to go back, research for 4 to 5 hours just to understand the entire picture, and then come back to the story. So that's kind of what I had to do last night. I had to go back, look at everything, and just figure out exactly what the entire chapter meant before I can be better for the next chapter review, because I still need to get my entire perspective of D.Gray-Man correct right now, because, I mean, as I said in my first, review impressions, that D.Gray-Man, I binged it, and I need to go back and read everything to get the finer details of the story, and that's kind of what I'm going to be having to do now because of how these chapters are. Now, let's get into the chapter meaning. So, the meaning of this chapter, I think it's kind of obvious. It's about Nia, and it's also about Mana. Now, the big thing about this is like the story, or the way the story presents itself with the chapter, which makes it very confusing for the reader, especially with the way the panels are made. So I'm going to go in order with the timeline of what this chapter meant. So, in the past, as we know, the Millennium Earl, he was Adam, and one day, for some reason unknown, we don't know the exact cause, but the Millennium Earl split into 2 people. Now, these 2 people came to be known as Mana and Nia, and they were actually, their full names were Mana D. Campbell and Nia D. Campbell. And this girl, Katarina, I think that's what her name was, she saw these 2 children, and she took them as like her own children, and she gave them names along with raising them up as brothers. So, she raised these 2 to be brothers. Even though they were the same person, she raised them up as brothers. Now, let's look at the finer details of what this means, okay? As we know, Noah, usually they pass down, and then when, you have like a Noah inside of you, the Noah memories start devouring and eating at your, body, your memories, your soul, and you start becoming an entirely different person. That's what's going on with Alan right now, with Nia inside of him. His entire memories and everything from his past is just starting to disappear as Nia takes over his body. So, this is kind of what I want to point at. So with the Millennium Earl splitting into two different beings, that means that his Noah memories were split into two different people. For instance, the Millennium Earl, Mana, and then you also have Nia. That's in Alan. So the Millennium Earl's Noah memories were split into two different people entirely. So this is a very different situation. As we know, the 14th is an existence that really shouldn't exist, but it's because, since the Millennium Earl split into two different Noahs that had their own individual memory, that's the situation we're in with the 14th. But now let's continue on down the timeline. Now, we don't really know the exact reason for this. This is my guessing and theory crafting right now, so this could be completely wrong. But, I mean, this is D.Gray-Man, so you can get a lot of things wrong. But my guess is, between the timeline of when these two boys were born, or up to the point to where Nia was mad at Mana and wanted to kill Mana, we have it to where there was a gap. And we know for a fact that Alan has to play a role in this. Because we do know there has been foreshadowing. I think chapter 215, there was talks about how Alan used to look older. He used to look older, he didn't look like he was now like a kid. How can this be? How is this possible? We saw this dialogue before. And thinking about it like this, for some reason, whatever reason there is, Alan was an adult, maybe 30-something, and he reverted down into a child. For what reason? Unknown. But the main thing you need to know is that Nia was in his body, probably at that time, what caused Alan to revert down into, like, some form of younger version of himself. But the big question is why? Why did this past Alan give up his own body to Nia, along with allowing Nia to eat at his memories and completely be forgotten? Like, why? That is the question that's still left unanswered, but let's continue trucking on. So, some reason, Nia is angry at Mana. And you have it to where it's focused probably around Katarina and maybe her death and stuff, and it leads into Mana defending himself, which eventually kills his own brother, Nia, and he devours him. He devours his own brother. But here's the thing. After the guilt of devouring his own brother, he breaks down. He has a mental breakdown. He starts doing anything he can, like he's losing his memories. The Noah starting to affect him, taking over his memories, which is the Millennium Earl, which is also what caused it to what happened to Nia's mother. For instance, the Millennium Earl, the Noah memories were coming back to Mana, which was causing this entire upset between the brothers. So as the memories started coming back, you had it to where Mana was just going crazy. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know what type of person he was. You know, what we seen with Alan. And as time passed on, with his guilt, he blew up his damn face. And which leads into where he probably dressed up as a clown and went to the circus. And then Alan, the past, or the new Alan, actually, not the past Alan, the new Alan Red, met, you know, Mana. And that's where the story continues off from there. Now, I don't really have any idea how to explain the Akuma part, with how Mana was killed by the Millennium Earl, and then you have it to where Alan that was there. My only assumption from what I can understand from that is this. Now, this is far out there, but I can assume this is what it means. As we know, when it comes to making Akuma, the soul of the dead is drawn back from God, or, you know, from the spiritual realm, and they're put inside of this body, an Akuma body. And that's what happened to Mana. As we see, Mana, the actual personality of Mana, he's gone. He's dead. Like, he's dead. The Millennium Earl took over his body. And throughout majority of this chapter, Nia was questioning Mana, or the Millennium Earl, talking about Mana, and it's like he was completely going against him, like, no, I don't remember this. This didn't happen. You know, he was denying everything that Nia said in the present time in this chapter. So it shows you he doesn't even remember any of this, which leads into how, what if, since Mana can be considered dead, even though it is the same person for the Millennium Earl, but Mana could be considered dead, what if, since he died, and the Millennium Earl Noah, Adam, took over, you know, the mind of Mana, and when Alan was there, what if, in a way, Alan's memories, Noah memories, were affecting him to where he felt like Mana died, but then, what if calling back Mana from the dead was, in a way, actually affecting the Millennium Earl? Like, what if the Millennium Earl, hear me out, split into different souls? Like, we see how he split into two people, Nia and then Mana. He split into two different people, two different personalities. This is kind of like a split personality disorder. He split into two different people. Well, it's not technically just one body, one or two different minds. It's now two bodies, two minds. But what if it goes further than that? What if the Millennium Earl now is also a different soul? For instance, there's 3 souls now from one soul split. And so that means that when Mana died thanks to the Millennium Earl Adam, that means Mana went to God. And then when Alan wanted to bring back Mana, Mana was brought back into the body of the Akuma. And when the Akuma died, the soul went back into the Millennium Earl. You get my point, because he was connected to the Millennium Earl through the Akuma. So what if Mana went back into the Millennium Earl's body, or his original body, and then that is what's causing this entire upset with Mana and the Millennium Earl in current time. That's what could be going on. But then it leads back into the question of Alan. What role does Alan have to play when it comes to Nia? Why did he allow Nia to get inside of him? And also, what role is Cross having to play in all of this? Because Cross, from what we can assume from the way this chapter is presented, he has some form of connection with Nia, and he is kind of his ally. So yeah, there's many things we have to wonder. And then also, Road, she knows everything as well. She knows the entire truth because she's one of the oldest. She knows what has happened, so she probably has a lot more information than anyone we know of in the series besides certain individual characters. So Road is going to play a huge role in these upcoming chapters of D.Gray-Man. And so that's what I got from this D.Gray-Man chapter. So, yeah, that was a very long breakdown. So, please forgive me, but I could be wrong there. I'm just gonna say now, I could be wrong. Don't quote me on it. Please don't. But that is what I got from some of the foreshadowing to the dialogue from previous chapters to some of the setup. And as we know, Alan's memories aren't really that trustworthy at all, so that means that what we saw in the past with Mana and then the Millennium Earl killing Mana, it might not really be the exact same thing. It could be like the Noah memories affecting Alan at that time, so that could be another way to really look at it. But for now, though, that's it. I'm done. You all have a wonderful day or night wherever you live. Please be safe. Chibi out.